Canada's MAiD program has to be the most despicable, disgusting thing I have ever seen.
7.3% of deaths in Quebec.
Canada proudly leads the world in organ donations through its MAiD program.
Doctors in Canada are now struggling to keep up with the demand for medical assistance in dying,
with 2023 alone claiming the life of over 15,000 Canadians. You might be wondering why such a steep increase.
Because what happens when you open the door to killing, you don't get to close or decide what walks through.
I put this into perplexity. 1 out of 20 deaths last year, I read this article that was saying was assisted suicide.
Of assisted dying. This is how evil enters quietly, with sterile language and bureaucratic indifference.
Canada is trying to push this medically assisted for young minors and teens.
Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button because today's story is not just news, it's one of the most heartbreaking and controversial chapters in modern Canadian history. Canada's MAiD program was originally introduced as a compassionate option for the terminally ill. But what it has become is something far more complicated, far more troubling, and far more revealing about the state of this country. In 2023 alone, Canada recorded over 16,000 MAiD deaths, 16,000 people, gone in a single year. And in Quebec, the numbers are even more shocking. MAiD accounted for 7.4% of all deaths in the province, the highest rate anywhere in the world, higher than Belgium, higher than the Netherlands, higher than any place that has ever legalized euthanasia. But the most disturbing part? Terminal illness is no longer the main reason people choose MAiD. Half of all cases now cite being a burden to family. 1 in 4 cite loneliness. Others are choosing death because of poverty, untreated pain, delayed care, and chronic conditions that are not terminal. Some patients even died within 24 hours of making the request. Today we break down the numbers, the ethics, the human stories, and what this means for the future of Canada.
Because what happens when you open the door to killing, you don't get to close or decide what walks through.
But Kelsey, what would be the incentive? What is the motive?
Ready? I got one for you.
Yeah, because you got to have a motive.
Money.
Let me show you how. Where is it? Someone dies, it's over. Chronicity is big business.
No. This is where you're wrong here, darling. End of life is money time. Okay? So, Canada, a new journal on the SAGE journal on the Omega website. You can go find it on SAGE. You know, the medical journals that are peer-reviewed papers from universities, which I can show it to you. It's called the Journal of Death and Dying. It came out this year. Okay. And they did an estimate of what Canada looks to save once they turn the mental illness into the MAiD protocol. So from 2027 to 2047, which is a 20-year period, that is when mental illness, meaning anybody can qualify. You don't have to be dying anymore, sweetheart. You can just have a hard time. And once you're in the system, you're in it.
So it doesn't cost them money to treat you through the government, so they save money.
You ready to find out how much? 2027 to 2047, they're expected to use MAiD on roughly, this is the journal's, they've done the math, this is the journal's estimate, 14.7 million Canadians. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to save to a tune of $1.273 trillion instead of providing palliative care.
Doctors in Canada are now struggling to keep up with the demand for medical assistance in dying. That's right, MAiD was legalized in 2016 and now accounts for about 1 in 20 deaths in Canada, more than Alzheimer's and diabetes combined, and surpasses countries where the practice has been legal for years longer. In 2018, the government predicted that Canada's MAiD rate would reach 2% of all deaths. Then in 2022, they estimated that it would stabilize at around 4% by 2033. And Canada has now blown past both numbers 11 years ahead of schedule, with the qualifications for MAiD set to expand to mental illnesses in 2027. And officials have now simply stopped publishing predictions.
People in Canada who still support the Liberal NDP Socialist Coalition, please explain these stats and how you still think that this administration is doing a good job. 1 in 20 deaths in Canada is because of government-assisted euthanasia, MAiD, right? 7.3% of deaths in Quebec is because of MAiD. That means people's circumstance is that horrific. They would rather opt for this. I also have circumstances where this is being pushed on people But that means that is how dire their situation is. Crime is up by 50%. Homelessness is up by 25%. Drug addiction is up by 21%. The average price of a home in Canada is $700,000, meaning our young people already know that even if they get a really good job and go to university and they work hard and do all the things, they're probably never going to own a house. You only have to open up your TikTok feed to see the mental health crisis that Canadians are facing. And while our dollar is continuing to tank, while inflation soars, while the government continues to print money, and you are taxed more than almost any other country in the world with poorer results than any other country, I'm not understanding what you're applauding here. I'm not understanding where you see good. I'm not seeing what you're seeing. I think this administration talks about all the good they're going to do, and they have convinced you that this is the party of love and saving the planet, but they have literally nothing to show for. It's never been worse here in Canada on every single measure. I'm not seeing what you're seeing.
This is sad to say. We have officially reached a new level of evil in this world. I want you guys to really pay attention to what I'm about to show you. This is the MAiD program, started in Canada. Now the MAiD program is medically assisted in, yeah, you know what I'm saying. I can't say it on this app, but you get where I'm going. Now Canada is trying to push this medically assisted for young minors and teens, not just adults who can make their own decisions. They're saying teens and young adults can now make the decision to medically off themselves. Check out the information on the pamphlet. This is how they're selling this. 1 in 10 people will wait 4 months for counseling. The MAiD program is available in 3 months. I am just blown away with all the bullying and depression on the rise, especially with this rising generation. This is what they're throwing at your kids. This is the out for them. If you're watching this and you are suffering with something like this, there is other ways. This is not the way. Canada, you should be ashamed. For sure. Maybe this is why Trump is trying to pull you guys in and make you guys the 51st state so you guys can rid of this crap. I'm over it.
I'm sorry, but if you think that the MAiD program in Canada, and if you don't know what that is medically assisted in dying or something along those lines. Basically, it's human euthanasia. Like taking your dog out back, yeah, it's essentially that, right? And if you guys think that that is going to turn into anything other than the H word that I cannot say on here, or the G word I can't say on here, you know, with the bad mustache man, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, that, if you think it's not going to turn into that, you are out of your fucking mind, okay? Because you're telling me they're going to allow people who are mentally ill with schizophrenia, depression, things along that nature to themselves, essentially, and then encourage that. It has already been proven that they're encouraging homeless people to do it, so the government doesn't have to spend money on them. This is what free healthcare gets you, people. This is what free healthcare gets you, okay? It's too fucking expensive for Canada to do it, so they're just unaliving people. That's what they're doing. They're encouraging people to unalive themselves so they don't have to take care of them. Now, I believe in that for people who have things like ALS, dementia, Alzheimer's, cancer, things along that nature. You should be allowed to go on your own terms. But if it's something that you can help and cope with and get medications and things along that nature, we should be doing that instead of performing the H word on people who are mentally ill. I don't get how nobody's talking about this.
Canada's death care system now expanding to children. A pamphlet spotted in Manitoba reveals Canada's quiet descent into a disturbing normalization of euthanasia, this time for children. In 2023, a federal committee endorsed the removal of age-based restrictions, arguing some minors are, quote, competent enough to choose death. Advocacy group Dying with Dignity Canada has even pushed to lower the age to 12. How does the concept of mature minors impact parental rights and legal protections?
Yeah, this is pretty dark, right? This is pretty dark. This to me is about as bad as it gets. You know, this is the largest erosion of parental rights that I can imagine, other than or along with stealing your kids. This is similar to like the sexual transition one.
I think it's actually worse than stealing your kids in a sense, because if somebody kidnaps your kids, you have a chance to get them back.
Maybe.
If
maybe
they
not.
Maybe. But you have a chance.
Yes.
So you're saying there's a chance.
So you're saying there's a chance.
You give them MAiD.
Yeah.
There's no reversing that.
No. I agree. I put it alongside it because there's been a lot more of stealing your kids over time than there has been, hey, we're gonna steal your kids. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Either way, look, it's really, really dark. But back to my point was that it very much mirrors this transition thing where minors are not fully capable of making irreversible medical decisions. So when you know that, you're like, we don't let them vote. We don't let them, buy alcohol. They can't buy cigarettes. They can't get tattoos. They can't buy lottery tickets because of the ramifications. So how do we give them the opportunity to end their life, regardless of their circumstance? For me, I also don't understand why this is even a conversation. Like, how fucked up are these people that you want to bring this into the zeitgeist?
So this is a story about a lawsuit grounded in a tragic situation. A man with chronic back pain and bipolar disorder who allegedly used a day pass from St. Paul's Hospital to end his life through medical assistance. But there's a much broader question being asked here, which is whether Canada's medical assistance in dying framework, or MAiD as it's known, is failing people who suffer both mental and physical illnesses. So here's what happened. According to his family, this 52-year-old man named JMM got approval for MAiD, but later changed his mind, deciding he wanted to try to deal with his back pain through other means. Now, his children, former spouse, and father claim he never should have been eligible for MAiD in the first place. Regardless, though, they got him committed to St. Paul's psychiatric unit because of his mental issues in late 2022, where they say the doctors actually agreed with them that he wasn't competent to consent to MAiD. Somehow, though, they say he got a day pass from St. Paul's, went to a clinic, and ended his life through MAiD. Now, the way MAiD works is that you cannot qualify on the sole grounds of mental illness. But in cases like JMM's, the family says people with mental and physical illnesses are vulnerable. And this case actually echoes another one that hit the BC courts back in October, asking similar questions. In that situation, a judge stepped in at the very last minute to stop an Alberta woman who came here to end her life through MAiD. Her partner said she had bipolar disorder as well as a medical condition. And the judge in that case said there was a serious issue to be tried about greater oversight and whether that was needed in terms of the MAiD process. JMM's family want damages for wrongful death and a declaration his rights were breached. None of the allegations in this latest case have been proven in court, and there's been no response to the lawsuit.
In 2016, Canada's euthanasia program named Medical Assistance in Dying, or MAiD, kicked off. Now that we're about a decade in, let's check in on how it's going. Take a look at the chart. Here are the year-over-year numbers of totally reported deaths through MAiD. As you can see, this is only heading in one direction, with 2023 alone claiming the life of over 15,000 Canadians. You might be wondering why such a steep increase. Are people in Canada really that sick? Well, in a way, enough of them apparently are. The program originally was only for those whose death was considered reasonably foreseeable, meaning those who were effectively near to death already. But surprise, surprise, it seems that the self-loathing and taste for blood grew dramatically over the first 5 years. In 2021, they widened the program to include those with solely chronic illnesses and disabilities. So your uncle with the knee that hurts every time the storm is blowing in could theoretically just end it all because he's sick of it. And yet the numbers are only going up from here still. Set to take effect in 2027, those who suffer solely from mental health issues such as depression can partake in MAiD. This year, national poll data indicated that nearly 1 in 3 Canadians say their mental health is significantly affecting their daily life, often due to depression. So a third of Canada might be eligible to commit suicide legally starting in 2027. Recently, there's been a push for minors as young as 12 to have access to MAiD, with children as young as 16 not even needing consent from their parents. So your high school junior could have a doctor euthanize him without his parents even knowing. They say they want eligibility in the program to be based on maturity rather than chronological age, in order to give the child more autonomy over their health care. Where will they go after this? Will you be able to just drive up to your local pharmacy and get a syringe of poison over the counter? This is what it looks like when a culture decides it hates itself. It is literally destroying itself in increasingly staggering numbers and finding new and more streamlined ways of doing it. We need to take note in America. Canada killed about 60,000 of its own citizens in just the first 8 years of this program. We already killed too many Americans through fertility clinics and Planned Parenthood centers. This is why it's good that our president is being tough on Canada. You should not be best friends with your neighbor if your neighbor is killing the members of his own house. Let's learn what not to do from Canada and move away from all forms of legally ending human life in America. If we lose our ability to see human life as something sacred, precious, and worth preserving, then we lose everything. Yes, that goes for abortion and the destruction of embryos in clinics just as much as euthanasia. This barbarism needs to end if our nation is to survive. And please, take a moment to pray for Canada.
Did you know that Canada has a public program that will assist you with killing yourself? That's right, MAiD, Medical Assistance in Dying, where you can call the government and they will help you or assist you to commit suicide. When I first heard this, I'm like, man, this can't be true. It's true. It's a thing. So for everybody thinking universal health care, where the government pays for all your medical expenses, for everybody that's thinking that's the way to go, that's where we should be, this is the result of that. Canada, ever since the pandemic, ever since all the madness, they have been by far one of the worst countries coming out of this with their totalitarian laws and measures and all the shit they putting in place. I think they're one of the countries where they're doing a lot of the testing for stuff they want to roll out across the board to other countries. They're doing a lot of that shit in Canada. And whoa, I would never want to live. It's already cold. Now y'all got this weird ass prime minister or president, whatever his title is. And they just, I mean, it's like total control up there. Yeah, I don't know how long that shit gonna last before the people start bucking.
The Canadian government is now calmly laying out the case for euthanizing children. A brochure in Manitoba with the heading "Made for Children in Teens" explains how a special committee of MPs and senators has recommended allowing euthanasia for what they're calling mature minors. Even more chilling, it states that parents might not be consulted and wouldn't need to give consent. Right beside it, a section on MAiD for mental illness, reminding us that while 1 in 10 Canadians waits over 4 months for counseling, the wait for MAiD is only 3. This isn't a one-off mistake. It's the logical outcome of a system that no longer views death as a tragedy but as a treatment. In February 2023, a federal parliamentary committee officially recommended expanding MAiD to include minors who are deemed capable of making such a decision. Their report concluded that age alone shouldn't determine eligibility for assisted death. Instead, it argued that some minors are competent enough to request their own deaths, effectively removing any meaningful age floor. Dying with Dignity Canada, or DWDC, one of the country's most influential advocacy groups on this issue, has gone even further. They've urged Parliament to lower the MAiD age to, quote, at least 12, claiming these children should be presumed capable of making decisions about their own deaths, just as adults are. In Quebec, things have already crossed into dystopia. Provincial guidelines now allow doctors to administer MAiD to patients who are unconscious or mentally incompetent as long as they previously gave advance consent. In defiance of federal homicide laws, Quebec prosecutors have even issued directives to protect doctors from prosecution. The slope is no longer slippery, it's vertical. Then there's Dr. Ellen Wiebe, one of MAiD's most prolific practitioners, who has personally ended hundreds of lives. She describes the work as incredibly rewarding and brags hundreds is good. She avoids calling it euthanasia, reserving that term for pets, and instead prefers the sanitized label of assisted dying. This is how evil enters quietly, with sterile language and bureaucratic indifference. We've replaced compassion with convenience, therapy with termination, and healing with death. And now, the state is preparing to offer it to children.
I think Canada's MAiD program has to be the most despicable, disgusting thing I have ever seen in my entire life, and I don't even exaggerate when I say that. For those of you who don't know what MAiD is in Canada, MAiD is a program known as Medical Assistance in Dying, and what MAiD does is they provide euthanasia to people who want it. You heard that right. If you are a Canadian and you suffer from disability, mental health issues, and much more, you can apply to be fucking euthanized through Canada's MAiD program. That's right. They are euthanizing human people who have disabilities and mental health issues at the lowest points of their life. And let's just call MAiD in Canada what it is. It's medically assisted suicide. There's no other way to phrase it. And the people who are administering MAiD in these healthcare programs are fucking murderers. MAiD is allowed to be administered to children as young as 12. And there are currently bills in the works in Canada to make it so children as young as 1 year old can be euthanized. Fucking disgusting, fucking deplorable. MAiD was originally introduced to Canada back in the year 2016. And its whole purpose, at first, was to allow people whose lives were so painful and so difficult to euthanize themselves if they so please. Like if you're 90 years old, you're at your last stages of life, you have stage 4 lung cancer, and you have 6 months left to live. Those are the types of people that MAiD was originally meant to cater to. Those were the only people who could originally get MAiD, medical assistance in dying. But eventually, Canada passed laws to expand the people who could get MAiD, such as people who suffer from disabilities and people who suffer from mental health issues. And what's so fucking dystopian about MAiD is Canada's healthcare system, whenever it fails, they always offer MAiD as an option. Even if you have mental health issues, MAiD can be administered in Canada. If you are somebody who is at the lowest point in your life, you've tried every possible thing to get rid of your mental health issues and make those mental health issues more bearable, and you prove that to Canadian medical officials, you can get medical assistance in dying. Essentially meaning that Canada will administer euthanasia to people at the lowest point in their life, rather than trying to give them some sort of mental help. And in some cases in Canada, MAiD can be administered to people quicker than they can get help in their fucking healthcare system. That's right, if you are somebody who suffers from mental health issues or disabilities and you need to get a treatment for those issues, it can take fucking months to get treatment to help with those issues. But if you are Canadian and you want to apply for medical assistance in dying, you can get euthanized that same very fucking day. You heard that right. Canada's healthcare system would literally rather euthanize people than assist them at their lowest, darkest points in life. And it's fucking disgusting. More attention needs to be brought to this. More people need to be talking about this because it's fucking eugenics. And another thing that's so fucking bewildering about the Canadian MAiD program is that it's responsible for 7% of all Canadian deaths. MAiD is slowly starting to become the top reason that people die in Canada. Year after year, there are explosions in the MAiD campaign. For the love of God, this is just how exponentially fast MAiD is expanding in Canada. These are the death totals that MAiD caused year after year. And you can see every year an exponential rise in people dying from MAiD in Canada. When MAiD was first introduced in 2016, it took the lives of 1,018 people who were at the end of their lives and required MAiD because they were most likely cancer patients who were given about 6 months left to live. But in the year 2022, when MAiD expanded to include people with disabilities and mental health issues, it ended up taking the lives of 13,241 Canadians in the year 2022. That is a 13 times increase in the amount of people getting euthanized in Canada from the year 2016 to the year 2022. If this shit doesn't absolutely horrify you, I don't fucking know what will.
To learn a little bit more about MAiD for children and teens. This is Canada, by the way, where they actually even brag about how much money this saves our healthcare system. So if you think it's about compassion, you are unbelievably misled. Let's read a little bit of here saying that a special committee of members of parliament and senators studying MAiD has recommended allowing MAiD for mature minors. A mature minor is a child or teen who is deemed capable of making a decision for MAiD. This would essentially remove the minimum age of eligibility. The committee also suggested parents may not be consulted and wouldn't need to consent to their child's death via MAiD. Why? Well, because children are uniquely vulnerable. Canada's first priority must be to provide high-quality medical care for children. The pamphlet goes on to suggest also MAiD for mental illness, which is something that we haven't talked about for a little bit, but if you're new here, welcome, and I'll fill you in. But if you have been watching for a while, this is something deeply close to my heart. I tried to take my life in my early 20s. I lost the man who I was with for close to 10 years to that exact same fate. So a unique perspective of being on both ends of the spectrum there, of being in that position and then going through treatment and recovery plans to be where I am today. And then also having the aftermath, the permanent melancholy of dealing with losing somebody in such a fashion. And so MAiD for mental illness is set to take effect in March of 2027. That's coming up real quick, and I don't think people are being loud enough about this. It says here basically that 1 in 10 people will wait more than 4 months for counseling. The waiting period for MAiD is only 3 months, thereby suggesting that, listen, don't waste your time waiting for a counselor. We can just end it for you in a shorter period of time. It says, we are already hearing about people asking for MAiD because they do not have the support needed to live. And I just really want you to think about that, by the way, the state of Canada. To all of those people who say, oh no, Canada's so great, we're so awesome. Are we really? Are we really? Because this goes to show otherwise. And of course, it's all under the guise of compassion and advocacy. I will tell you, though, there is nothing compassionate about this. This is pure evil. And I can't even imagine the type of demonic that somebody would need to be to actually advocate for MAiD for young, vulnerable people and people who are experiencing some really tough times in life, when what they really need is a better system and what they really need is help and somebody to listen to them. Not going to talk to somebody and then them saying, you know what, you're right. That devil on your shoulder that's telling you all kinds of lies right now, it's right. Yeah, we're going to help you, by the way, because it's going to save us a lot of money.
This is exciting because I'm in front of a construction site.
So someone received this message and it says, my friend who works in addiction sent me this. It's a flyer in their facility in Manitoba. Unfathomable. And I'm just going to read this. MAiD for children and teens. A special committee of MPs and senators studying MAiD has recommended allowing MAiD for mature minors. A mature minor is a child or a teen who is deemed capable of making a decision for MAiD. This would essentially remove the minimum age of eligibility. The committee also suggested that parents may not be consulted and wouldn't need to consent to their child's death via MAiD. Children are uniquely vulnerable. Canada's first priority must be to provide high-quality medical care for children. Unbelievable. MAiD for mental illness is set to take effect on March 2027. Hopelessness and a desire to end one's life can be a symptom of some mental illnesses. Many Canadians struggle with their mental health. There are long waiting lists for treatment and it can be expensive. 1 in 10 will wait more than 4 months for counseling. The waiting period for MAiD is only 3 months. Unbelievable. We are already hearing about people asking for MAiD because they do not have the support needed to live. Unbelievable. This is now a new option and a new avenue that they want children to have. Instead of confronting problems and getting the required help needed from the government, this is the out. And yet they complain about our low birth rates? This is unbelievable.
I put this into perplexity. 1 out of 20 deaths last year, I read this article that was saying was assisted suicide. That can't be true. That can't be true.
Where'd you see it?
Because Canada has an assisted suicide program, a national assisted suicide program. Yeah.
Could you imagine if there's some corruption in that? Holy crap.
There's corruption in everything,
right.
Jeff. Everything.
That's
Every
a bad
fucking
one.
thing. There's corruption in religion. There's
sure.
Right? There's corruption in science. There's
right.
corruption in medicine.
Which becomes a great excuse to not be a part of those things, you know? Oh, I won't even question if I have a creator because there's fouled people in the church. You're like, that's so stupid.
Well, yeah.
accurate for Canada.
Wow.
One
No,
in
of course
20?
not America.
I know,
Canada.
just, yeah.
It's Canada.
Yeah.
Let me see
That's
the
still a
numbers.
lot, isn't it?
Put those, show the perplexity. Look at this. This is crazy. Medical assistance in dying, known as MAiD, also as known as assisted suicide or euthanasia, accounted for approximately 4.7% of all deaths in Canada.
That's wild.
That
But
is so crazy.
how do we get more specific? Like, what would be an example of how?
We'll read into it. This proportion is equivalent to about 1 in 20 deaths across the country. That is so fucking insane. 1 out of 20 people who die in Canada are getting assisted suicide. How many of those fucking people you could have given mushrooms to? They could have had an ibogaine journey. Maybe they could have fucking done something differently with their life to get them out of depression. How many of them could have gotten alternative medical treatments that have dealt with their condition? So what are the conditions? Did you put that in there, Jamie?
Average age of them is 77. So they're
pretty old.
Yeah, that is old. But however, my mom's 80. She's great. Like what's going on?
Yeah,
she doesn't want to. Like what? But what is it? Are you not just because you're 77? Are you not enjoying life, or is it 1 out of 20 people are dying of a terminal illness? And I am being short-sighted because I'm not they're like going to die soon anyway. They choose to die on their own. Is that the case?
Track 1 is natural death is reasonably foreseeable, and track 2 is not reasonably foreseeable for natural death.
Right. So track 2 recipients, this is where it gets weird because some of them were chronically obese. Some of them were chronically depressed. They were doing it for people that don't really have a disease. So what are the parameters? Let's put this, ask a follow-up. What do you have to have wrong with you to qualify for MAiD in Canada? Let's just ask that.
How do you qualify for MAiD?
Because if it's just you're depressed,
that's scary.
That's crazy.
Right, and very irresponsible. If you have cancer and they're trying to just like, I'm done with my fight, please help me.
Right.
Is what track 1 is, but we're talking about track 2.
Be at least 18 years old and capable of making healthcare decisions. Be eligible for publicly funded health service. Okay, that's normal. Voluntary request. Informed consent. Have a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability causing enduring and intolerable suffering that cannot be alleviated under conditions acceptable to the person. But that's the key word, the key phrase there. Acceptable to the person is interesting. Be in an advanced state of irreversible decline in capability. Okay, are people with depression, just write severe, are people with severe depression eligible for MAiD? Write that. Severe depression. Because a lot of people would say that is an incurable disease. Where would we be without the red squiggly line? I don't know how to spell anything.
I can't spell anything, ever. I never have been.
Jamie, you're rolling the dice with eligible? You're an animal.
It knows.
In Canada, people whose sole underlying medical condition is severe depression or any other mental illness are currently not eligible for medical assistance in dying. This temporary exclusion includes psychiatric conditions like depression and personality disorders. The law excludes eligibility for MAiD on the basis of mental illness alone in March 17, 2027. However, people with mental illnesses may be eligible if they have a grievous, or irremediable. Boy, that's a word. Have you ever said that word? Irremediable?
No, dude.
Irremediable. I've never said that
what
word.
you're talking to. I've never said that.
But I've never even seen that. Irremediable. Physical health condition that meets MAiD's criteria. The government has delayed eligibility expansion for mental illness due to concerns around safety and appropriate safeguards. When MAiD for mental illness becomes legal, they say it like it will be.
2027 March.
Oh, okay. That's what I'd read. Okay, this was the issue. So they were going to. Okay. The law excludes eligibility for MAiD on the basis of mental illness alone until March 17, 2027. So there's a year and a few months, and then these people are eligible for this. As of 2025, severe depression alone does not qualify. So what it seems like is a lot of people that are just not doing well. It's the end of their life, and they're like, I'd like to go out on my own terms.
That's fair.
I don't want to just walk into a library with a 44 and make people clean up.
Or they go, I'm a financial burden on my family, or those kind of things.
Yeah.
When you're an old person, you feel a little guilt that, like, my kids.
That's true. And also, sometimes people, like, one of their loved ones dies and they don't want to be alone. They just can't. They've been with this person for 45 years.
My dad just died, and my mom is not doing great with I mean, she's been with him since she was 17.
It's very hard. My grandfather died 1 year after my grandmother died, and he was fine up until then. And it was just like the grief was just intolerable.
What we're seeing with Canada's MAiD program is not just a policy debate, it's a mirror held up to our society. And what that mirror shows is painful. In a country once known for compassion, community, and dignity, more and more Canadians are choosing death not because they're dying, but because they're struggling to live, when 50% of MAiD recipients say they feel like a burden on their families, when 24% say loneliness, not illness, is driving their decision. When people are requesting MAiD because they can't get a wheelchair ramp, or because they can't afford food, or because they waited months for basic medical care, that's not autonomy, that's abandonment. A country's values are revealed not in how it treats the strong, but in how it protects the vulnerable. And right now, Canada is failing those who need protection most. We've normalized suffering. We've normalized isolation. We've normalized the idea that people should choose death because the system refuses to support their life. And yes, policymakers know all this. They know MAiD saves over $100 million a year. They know palliative care is underfunded. They know mental illness was almost added as a reason to die, without fixing the system that caused that suffering in the first place. But here's the truth. No nation can call itself compassionate if its most vulnerable citizens see death as their only escape. No healthcare system can call itself humane if people choose euthanasia faster than they can access treatment. No government can call itself responsible when cost saving looks more important than life saving. This is not about politics. This is about humanity. If we want a Canada where people choose life, we have to build a Canada where life is worth choosing, better mental health support, real palliative care, accessible housing, reduced wait times, and a safety net that protects, not pressures. MAiD should never be the answer to poverty, loneliness, or bureaucratic failure. And that's why we have to ask the hard questions. Because if we don't, this crisis will only grow. If you made it this far, thank you. Your voice matters, your attention matters, and your willingness to confront uncomfortable truths is what keeps this conversation alive. Let me know in the comments. Do you believe Canada's MAiD system has gone too far? Or is it still fulfilling its original purpose? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This conversation needs to reach every corner of this country, because if we stay silent, we risk becoming a nation that chooses death over dignity.